Let's go upstairs and we'll convene out there. As the group begins to assemble, this, we'll wait for a few more to get into it, I guess. So, yeah, should we have a moment?
Well, okay, we're going to get a picture. We'll get a picture now, and then you can do your
Okay. Sure. Okay. Ready, guys?
Good start so far.
I'm sorry, can you do one more looking at the camera for me?
Thank you. Do you want us to look at you for
Yes,
a
please.
second?
Okay. Perfect. What about,
Are you done?
what about in the corner with the... Yeah, with the sign. You know what? I'll let you guys do your thing, and then I'll bug you after.
So let me just, okay, so I'll just tee up a couple of quick things for you. Many of you, most of you, are from well outside of Canada, let alone Toronto. Toronto is Canada's most important city from an economic perspective. Culturally, Montreal might want to claim it. From a geography perspective, Vancouver might want to claim it. The interesting thing about Toronto that makes it really unique is a ravine system. And a ravine system is simply a series of rivers that run through the system. It has the largest ravine system of any city in the world, 27,000 acres, and I'll give you a better view of that when we get out into the quarry behind us. But this site, as a brick factory, sat in the middle of that ravine system because of all the clay material in a valley. And as a brick factory, it drew the clay out of the soil, out of the ground, and produced brick, 43 million bricks a year. So this building sits inside the footprint of one of the original buildings. And it's referred to as the Center for Green Cities, this building. And it's about a 60,000 square foot building, 58,000 square feet. And this second floor space includes a series of meeting rooms, conference facilities. It will be the venue for the telepresence facility. It really is a support facility to the larger conference facilities on both the ground floor and over in the kiln building, which we'll visit later. The largest events we've had on site have held 3,000 people. There are big conference facilities and meeting facilities on site. Although, I've got to add that 3,000 number came with a bunch of 20-year-olds with something that looked more like a rave than it did a conference. But nonetheless, it was a big group of people who had a lot of fun here. We can sit about 700 people at round tables for dinner. Meeting facilities on the ground floor support 1,500 people for food with big catering kitchens. But anyway, this floor is the essence and the heart of what we're driving at with Cisco. Although Cisco is very much distributed across the entire campus. So the idea is to go from this great spot and then go for a tour outside and enjoy what's outside and see the quarry and loop through the buildings. Do we need any more moments here?
Can you talk a little bit more about the display a little bit?
Well, I wish I knew more of the details, but the big idea behind this dimension of our strategy with Cisco is to it's about data visualization. And lots of people are trying to figure out data visualization. Very few of them have got it right. You want to speak to the specifics of this?
Yeah, I can speak to it.
But just a tiny bit more of an introduction. Evergreen's history for the last 20 some odd years has been grounded in action and getting people to do stuff. And we've spent a lot of time working with artists over the last 20 years. Artists and people who add visual commentary to what is otherwise a somewhat mundane subject matter. And reports and data around energy use and whatnot fits in that category of mundane if it's not treated properly. This is a moment where we're turning mundane into attractive and appealing and energizing for people to make decisions around. So over to you on what it really does.
Yeah, sounds good. So I met most of you guys yesterday, so you may remember me from the presentation that we did with Elaston, Complexity, and Delta. You saw our VoIP control application in action yesterday, but what you haven't seen is our dashboard. And this is a really cool product because it was built in collaboration with Evergreen. And Robert Plitt is somewhere around here. Robert was really instrumental in helping us put this product together. Basically, he put the challenge to us. He said, you know, there are a lot of great dashboards that are out there, but we want to tell a unique story. And we worked with Bill McGowan and Ron Gordon to try to figure out how do we tell that story, and who do we want to tell that story to? And one of the target audiences is grade 8s. You know, kids going to school. Evergreen wants to show students and the general public all the great stuff that they're doing here. So you guys will be able to get a link and play around with the dashboard. And when you do so, you'll see a great story about the water conservation efforts that are being done here with real data, data that's being collected from a network of sensors. We're showing how much water is being conserved. We're showing how much rainwater is being collected and used in the toilets and in the chillers throughout the building. We're talking about the smart building initiatives that have been done through things like the Cooper Digital Lighting Control System, through solar chimneys and a variety of HVAC technologies.
The project, just to interrupt for a second, has won awards all over the world, literally in Switzerland and the United States, obviously across Canada, in London, and these awards internationally are going to get challenged by the raw data, and we're going to find out whether we actually deserve those awards.
Absolutely, absolutely.
Because this will be the real stuff.
Absolutely, absolutely.
I might suggest that because we've got a fairly tight time, we're going to head out, and maybe you can have one-on-ones with people around some of the details of how the data works. But we're going to go out this door here, along the veranda of the front, and down into the corridor.
Okay. Jeff,
Oh yes, please. Why don't you guys meet us just around to the right? You can begin to wander down.
Just go to the right on the balcony.
That way?
Not to the left.
Yeah, you can see why I represented the grade 8 demographic. Those people look familiar.
Yeah. Bit of a sense for the kind of fabric of the old buildings. It was a really careful process of rebuilding the site because we wanted to keep the edginess of the space, the graffiti, the kind of rawness of the space, and yet weave in all of these community programs.
When did it stop being a bird factory?
About 18 years ago, 20 years ago.
It stood something this high. It was
So it started.
Well, we only started construction about 4
But
we
it's
only
in that
opened
building there. That's all open concept in that building. They've got nature walks up into here and all these things. I was talking about your prehistoric beaver over there.
I'll get into the detail of it.
Will we get to see that?
Prehistoric
Not the beaver for certain, but
Well,
things that resemble.
well, the fossil things that you had over there. Yes.
Exactly.
Oh yeah. Yeah.
So we get about upwards of 400,000 visitors a year. It's a really unique public space. National Geographic actually identified it as one of the top 10 geotourism destinations in the world 2 years ago. And you know, when the National Geographic in Washington gave it this big award, I thought something was wrong, and I thought they made a mistake, but they were flying me down to Washington, so I kind of went along with it. In the end, the thinking at National Geographic was that the vast majority of the big geotourism concepts and projects that are celebrated are in Nepal and various rainforest initiatives and Africa and whatnot, and the big idea was that we need to start finding big natural outlets in cities instead of traipsing across the world to the Himalayas or the Serengeti or the rainforests of Borneo to find these wonderful spaces. Some of these wonderful natural spaces are in our own cities, and the ravine system of Toronto and this site as a gateway into that ravine system was part of it. So this space below us is a design, as an area that speaks to the design of children's playgrounds, showcases best practice, low-tech concepts for how we should be thinking about the design of children's learning environments. Moving pizza ovens, greenhouses, bake ovens, sort of fire courtyards. There's a big water tower that moves water across the site. So it's really about engaging kids in innovation and thinking about ideas, quite frankly. And because there's a very strong sense of co-creation and innovation for kids down here in this space. This is not one of those kind of behind the glass box experiences. This gets hands in the dirt. So we're going to walk now down the stairs behind us and into the quarry, and I'll give you the next set of ideas over there. So as you're walking this way, if you look behind you, you also see one, how the building operates, but also the climbing tower, an outward bound facility that really challenges anybody to get up it. So it's a pretty neat installation. And it's really hard. I couldn't even come close to getting up it. Although my 11-year-old boy had no trouble.
Are you going to mention deliberately leaving the graffiti?
Yeah, I'll do that. Okay. Yeah.
My husband's concerned to watch the water, so he stuff up here. It's just really cold all the time.
Yes, exactly. Exactly.
Dinner. Well, yeah, exactly. Other than don't go anywhere.
So just as you come in here, there are a whole bunch of stories I could get into at this particular site. The quarry, the original quarry where they dug the soil from the ground, talk about low-tech, clay, just mud. They took the mud out of this pit. We used to be 150 feet deeper. Prisoners of war worked here, German prisoners of war worked here during World War II. We have beaver still in this particular quarry. There's several blue heron who use it. Great fishing. There's 7 of these ponds that go back. The north slope at the far end is regarded as one of the 5 most important geological sites in North America. It's what led to the expropriation of the site from real estate developers in the late 80s and led to its protection. It was a fabulously important, this is regarded by many as the birthplace of the city of Toronto. The soil from this site created the red, orange and yellow brick that dominates the landscape of Toronto's neighborhoods. And so if you drive through any of the neighborhoods, especially the older ones of Toronto, you can literally tell which are the old neighborhoods versus the newer, etc. Because yellow brick is just it's a strata, it's a layer. The yellow's near the top. You get to the yellow first, and then you get into descending colors because it's chemical compounds in the soil that lead to that coloration, and to some degree how they're baked. We kept the graffiti. Well, I mean, this is really the reason. This is the reason the site is incredibly special. It's also the reason why Toronto is uniquely important globally. We have, as I said earlier, the largest ravine system of any city in the world, 27,000 acres. They're trails that take you everywhere here. And interestingly and almost metaphorically, they connect every single neighborhood in the Toronto, rich or poor, cultural diversity, etc. This kind of web of green that doesn't discriminate. It's a really amazingly democratic environmental asset for the citizens, and it's all free. It was protected back in the 1950s when we had a huge hurricane that blew through Toronto, Hurricane Hazel, that killed a large number of people because it literally flooded out all these residential areas that were in the valley system. So the city of Toronto, in its brilliance, decided to protect the ravine system because they didn't want anybody building in it because they thought people might die again in these kind of catastrophic floods. Ironically, they created an asset, not just a flood control system, but a natural asset for the community. So we have become the de facto gateway into that system. So very much a community asset for the citizens of Toronto. And layering on top of that is this relationship we're developing with Cisco. So you can sort of take this web of green and layer on top of it this technology web, but Cisco's taking this site as a venue for the citizens of Toronto and translating it into a network and a web for globally for how cities can be considered as a sustainable asset, as a sustainable idea going forward. So enough of that poetic stuff. Behind you is a collection of buildings, the 16 buildings. This is really where the material, the raw material, fed into the brick factory and was pulverized into powder or taken as soft mud and produced. But straight ahead is the main area where the largest farmers market in Toronto happens every Saturday. Roughly 2,500 to 3,000 people come together with over 100 vendors. Very, very strong focus on local produce. It's a real, authentic farmers market, and it's become a real gathering point for the community. So we'll walk through these buildings. You'll see all these murals on the walls that talk about the history of the site, going back to the 1892 over here. They're photographs of the site. It gives you a sense of the history. You'll also notice graffiti on all the buildings. Two reasons why there's still lots of graffiti. One of them is it was going to cost us $250,000 to remove it, and that was just too much in a tight budget. And the other one was began to realize that it was actually part of the fabric of the site. It was part of the storyline of the history. Some of it's vandalism. I get you. If you feel that way, I appreciate that view and agree with you on that level too. It's also an amazingly important kind of expression of a youth community who actually consider this site very relevant to themselves. So we get the hippest and coolest parties here because that group thinks this is a cool place, largely because of the graffiti. So it creates a really nice hook for a different audience that typically wouldn't be involved with something as seemingly earnest as this project is on some level. So we'll go into the farmers market area and then we'll head back into the main building. Some classes,
Yes.
Thanks so much for coming and being part of this.
Thank you. Thank you for alerting
Just because there's so many people from outside of Canada, I gotta put this one out there. If you can't see this, this is a kind of loose silhouette of a beaver. And we all know how the beaver is a bit of a symbol of Canada. This site, they discovered fossilized remains of these mythical, they're no longer mythical, giant beavers. Your average beaver today weighs about 35 kilos. This beaver weighed about 250 kilos. So giant beavers went with giant trees, went with a very dramatic landscape that existed here during the last ice age. So these teeth were found, and they are on display at the Royal Ontario Museum. But this is the home of the monster beaver. And it couldn't be a better Canadian symbol for us and for all of you international visitors. These are the whole agenda of climate change is part of the environmental message. The geological strata. This shows the geology of this site. incredibly important geological site for all the fossils. If you ever want to come down and find fossils, they're all over the place back there. The handwriting here is all from an important, a famous geologist back at the turn of the last century. These are his notes from 1897 when he was first exploring the site. And some of the notes here talk about 2 species of elephants, 1 to 2 mastodons, 4 to 5 muskox, giant beaver, yes, he's noted here back in 1897. 6 mammals extinct, 70 species, insects extinct. It goes on and on and on. So the idea of extinction and climate change is very deeply documented here. Yeah. And it's one of the reasons why this site has such a relevant storyline for the environmental aspects of city building. So we'll carry right back in. We're right on time, almost to the minute. We'll sequence back in. Classrooms and working facilities for Outward Bound, farmers market spaces, woodworking studios. A lot of future ambitions in some of the buildings that are still boarded up, but we'll get into that more later.